All right, welcome. Thank you everyone for joining us. I'm Tony Wilkin Gibart of Midwest Environmental Advocates. And we are joined today by the Crawford Stewardship Project with Forest Jahnke representing that organization. And I'm just so glad we could get together. We're talking today about the Roth Feeder Pig 2 proposal, which along with its sister facility, which is currently in existence, if the proposal were to go forward, the joint facility would be the largest hog CAFO in Wisconsin. And we're talking about what Crawford Stewardship Project and local neighbors and community members are doing to voice their concerns about the nitrates and bacteria that could flow from that proposal and contaminate groundwater and surface water in this really special part of the state. So in addition to myself from Midwest Environmental Advocates, Adam Voskuil, our staff attorney who has been working with the community, is joining us, and Susan Robinson from Crawford County, who along with her husband is a farmer and raises about 600 head of cattle near the facility. So thank you all for being with us. And Susan, we're going to start this conversation with you. We're going to talk about why this part of the state, why this region is particularly susceptible to contamination from a CAFO. But before we talk about that, let's just talk about what makes this part of the state really special. Why do you love where you live? And Susan, I think you're still muted.
Unmute. There. Can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you.
Oh, good. We love this part of the state. We searched all over to find an area where we could do our adaptive managed grazing with the cattle. And we looked in different states. We ended up here because this truly is the best environment for us. It wasn't a very populated area. We were able to get a fair amount of land, and in Wisconsin, you don't need as much land as you do in a lot of the western states because we do have a lot of water and we have a very suitable climate. And this seemed to be the perfect place, and we love it. Our every moment is spent here, and we've become very successful at what we're doing. It's taken a while and a lot of hard work, but this is the perfect place, and we really don't want to lose that. You know, we don't want anything to get in the way of us doing what we're doing, and we're great stewards of the land. We really truly take care of everything and respect the land, and we really wish that everyone could do that because it's special. This is just a special area.
Thank you for sharing that. And Forrest, could you tell us a little bit about Crawford Stewardship Project and maybe also just your perspective on what Susan just shared with us?
Yeah, I'm happy to. And the Robinsons farm, I've been to it, is really exemplary, beautiful rolling pastures of grass and happy cows. And so Crawford Stewardship Project is very interested in agriculture and the future of agriculture in this area. Like Susan mentioned, we're actually uniquely a special place for this kind of pasture-based agriculture. However, and we'll get into more of the specifics of this later, we're also a very uniquely sensitive place to any sort of industrial or potentially polluting industries. And so Crawford Stewardship Project has taken on quite a few issues over the years. We started about 13 years ago. And our vision is of empowered communities in sustainable relationship with thriving ecosystems. And in order to achieve that, our mission is to protect Crawford County and neighboring regions from threats of polluting and extractive industries, to promote environmental justice, local control of natural resources, and sustainable land and water use. So we've been around a while. This operation here came to our attention a little over a year ago, and we've been organizing with the neighbors of this proposal to see what their concerns are. And that's really how we try to operate as a grassroots organization, is empowering the people most impacted.
Thank you. And so one of the things that recently happened was that MEA, along with Crawford Stewardship Project, and over 200 local residents of Crawford County requested that the DNR conduct an environmental impact statement regarding the proposal. So I want to ask Adam, if you could tell us what an environmental impact statement is. We call it an EIS, kind of for short. So what's an EIS? When is it conducted? And what is our request to the DNR in this case?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for asking the questions and having the say, and thank you for Forrest and Susan for showing up as well and talking about this. An environmental impact statement, or an EIS, is at its heart an informational document that is intended to review major actions significantly affecting the human environment. And its purpose is to really understand a project's effect on kind of the environment as a whole. So not necessarily limited to a specific issue, but really to understand the broader effects on the neighbors, the water, the land, just to really get a grasp of the far-reaching effects, recognizing that so much of the environment is interconnected, and there's an inherent value, but also a cost to really engaging in a lot of these detrimental or extractive processes. And so what our request was for the DNR to understand that this large hog CAFO, as you stated earlier, taken in along with its sister facility just a few miles away, would represent the largest hog CAFO in the state. And so recognizing that that makes it different, and therefore there should be an additional process, an additional review, really understanding the environmental effects of these two facilities, ultimately acting as one, with just the sheer amount of manure that they'll have in that confined area, and recognizing that in addition to just their size, the location of being in such a sensitive region also make that the proposed project different. And so collectively, we're asking that DNR make that recognition, but then take the next step and actually begin that robust environmental analysis, because what the applicant has to do, short of that, just an integrated process that runs along with some internal permits that a CAFO has to request from DNR, is just insufficient to truly understand the far-spanning geographic effects, or the effects on sensitive areas, or the cost to rehabilitate should things like groundwater or surface water be deleteriously affected by that proposed project. So, just to wrap it all up, it's really a request to see science-based decision-making and robust reviews of these large projects kind of brought back into the DNR's process.
Thanks, Adam. Forrest, we've talked a little bit here about the Roth Feeder Pig 2 proposal. Is there anything else that you would want folks to know just in general about the proposal and the would-be facility, so that audience members have an understanding of what we're talking about?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So for a little additional context, the current Roth Feeder Pig facility is the only CAFO, concentrated animal feeding operation, of over 1,000 animal units in the county. It's already the largest operation in the county. This new proposal would be roughly 3 times the size of this existing facility, and would produce about 10 million gallons of liquid manure, little under that. In combination, they'd be spreading about 13 million gallons of liquid manure on these very sensitive landscapes that we've been talking about. And Roth Feeder Pig is a second generation farm here in Crawford County. However, they're really the voice of the big pork industry. AV Roth Owner Operator is the president of the National Pork Producers Association. And we see this really as the possible beginning of a very new kind and new scale of agriculture in this county and in this area, like we already see just across the river in Iowa and some of the flatter areas.
Right. And again, we've talked a little bit so far about the sensitive nature of the region and why this particular location would be especially problematic. But could you say a little bit more about that? Why would this be a especially bad place to site a CAFO of this size and type?
Certainly. For those of you who don't know Crawford County, we're talking about some of the steepest slopes in the Midwest and really precious and extensive watersheds, lots of streams, trout streams, important rivers. We have the Kickapoo River, which is just downslope from this proposed operation, a really iconic river here in the Driftless. Also the Lower Wisconsin Riverway, which is just downslope from the current operation, and the Kickapoo runs into it just downstream. Both of these rivers contain wetlands of continental and international importance, so some really special and sensitive ecosystems contained within there, both for native species as well as migratory species as well. We're also talking about very sensitive karst geology, so fractured carbonate bedrock filled with sinkholes and caves and springs and underground rivers, and this whole interconnected fracture network filled with direct conduits into the groundwater. So again, this is a very special, ancient, sensitive region that anything potentially polluting can very quickly go straight into people's groundwater and straight into people's drinking water. So that's, of course, extremely concerning. We're also concerned about how the air could pool in some of the river valleys. In some of the mornings, you can see how the mist and the heavier air really pools and settles in the valleys, and we're concerned that the fumes from this operation could concentrate to really noxious levels for the neighbors just downslope from it, less than a half mile away in the Kickapoo River Valley.
Great, thank you. And regarding the sensitive geology and the susceptibility of karst bedrock to nitrate contamination, just want to note that even just this week that our partners at Clean Wisconsin and the Environmental Working Group released a study estimating between approximately 100 and 300 cases of certain types of cancer in Wisconsin due to nitrate contamination, and about 150 as an estimate cases of low birth weight, between 70 and 79 cases of preterm birth. So we're talking about very serious human health consequences as well when we talk about nitrate contamination and bacterial contamination.
Absolutely. And I would add that we don't even really know what the quality of the drinking water is for all the residents of Crawford County. We're only just now doing some coordinated county, in fact, tri-county wide well testing campaigns to get somewhat of a baseline. But in the meantime, we need to be looking into these things more carefully. And in fact, the DNR and DACCAP have already essentially admitted that the existing regulatory framework and best management practices do not protect drinking water and groundwater in karst areas when they protected eastern Wisconsin, 15 states there, or 15 counties there over the Silurian Dolomite. But they just haven't done the studies yet to designate this area as a sensitive area, although they're looking into it now. So hopefully we will get some additional protections, but for now we're under the same one-size-fits-all rules as the rest of the state.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for pointing that out. And that speaks to why an impact statement, environmental impact statement, would be especially important here. And so, Adam, has this been done before? Has DNR conducted EISs for CAFO permitting?
Yeah, it's a kind of an interesting story in that we've seen a shifting landscape in some ways for how an environmental review of a CAFO is done. And it's not necessarily directly correlated to the sheer rise, the exponential growth that we've seen of CAFOs in this region. So early 2000s to mid 2000s or mid 2010s, we were seeing what was done was an environmental analysis. And then from there, we've actually seen a reversion back to something that's called an integrated analysis, whereby the DNR states that through the permitting process, we're essentially getting an environmental review throughout that process. But the DNR since then has recognized that there have been instances where an environmental impact statement is required because the integrated analysis framework that they use for specific CAFOs is simply inadequate. So to date, we've seen, I believe, 2 CAFOs or proposed CAFOs go through the EIS process, one in northern Wisconsin and then one in the Central Sands. And that's kind of the impetus for this request as well is this again is a special case of a very important and sensitive region that requires a more robust analysis. And additionally, there's an expectation that DNR really is dedicated to ensuring that there's science-based decision-making taking place at the agency. And this is, again, in concert with the fact that this is such a special area, really something that requires a more robust understanding before we go through that permitting process.
Thanks, Adam. And there are times when MEA or other environmental organizations are advocating for DNR to take a certain step, and in some of those cases, there's a question as to whether DNR has the legal authority or whether the kind of the factual predicates have been met for DNR to take a particular action. In this case, what's the standard? Can DNR, in its discretion, conduct an EIS if they want to? What's your view of that?
Yeah. So there's a provision in the regulations that specifically provides for DNR to create an EIS at their discretion, and then it lists 8 factors in that regulation, Wisconsin Administrative Code NR 150. And based on that framework, that's really, if one were to put the requirements of NR 150 right next to the EIS request, you'd note that they mirror each other in terms of the specific factors and the factual predicate that are used to support each of those factors. So we tried to mirror that framework to ensure that the EIS request really did hit on each of those discretionary factors to provide the strongest argument for DNR to really approve that request and begin this environmental analysis.
So basically, we, through the request that we filed in conjunction with Crawford County, have documented for DNR why they have the discretion to take this step, and we of course hope that they do, and and so I want to, that I guess feeds into my next question for you, Adam. Just give me kind of like the top 3 reasons why DNR should conduct an environmental impact statement in this case.
Sure. It's going to feel like we've repeated some of these before, but I think they're so important. I think the number 1 reason is just the sensitivity of the region. We've talked about it both in terms of the slopes and the karst geology, but really, in addition to that, just understanding that there's such a reliance in that community on clean water. both as drinking water and as surface water. And so I think, as an underlying point made repeatedly throughout our request, and really something that I hope carries through, is that this recognition that there need to be, in the future, would need to be additional practices in place to ensure that the groundwater and surface waters are protected there. But short of that, really there needs to be more of an understanding of how a CAFO, an additional extremely large CAFO in that region, will have such a detrimental effect on the environment. So one, sensitivity of the region. And then two, kind of related to that, is I think a recognition of the size of the project. We're combining those two facilities because they're 4 miles away from each other, and they're spreading on fields likely right next to each other. And so the sheer size would make that facility, those two facilities, when combined, as the largest hog CAFO in the state. So size, number two, and then number three, this removes it a bit from Crawford Stewardship Project, or from Crawford County, but really that third point is that we've seen a DNR and Evers administration that have provided goals and expectations that, clean water, clean drinking water are of the utmost importance in our state. And in addition, there's been a recognition that we need to bring science-based decision-making back into the fold at the agency. And so, the third reason is I really think that this provides an example, a perfect opportunity for both the DNR and the Evers administration to show up for the values that they continue to express to the public. I think that was three.
Yeah, great. And so just putting kind of those two pieces together, this is an instance where the Evers administration and the DNR has the discretion to make a decision to integrate science-based decision-making to protect drinking water in our state. And so that really ties together some of their priorities, their top-level priorities and goals. And so we're very, very hopeful that they take that step. And over 200 community members have joined in this call to the DNR. I want to ask Susan to come back into the conversation. Just talk to us about how the community has responded to the proposal, and then some of the ways in which residents are engaged and organizing themselves and making their voices heard.
I think as far as the community, it's become a very divided community. So you have the people that are really concerned about it. And then you have the people that the roasts are very popular in the area. They're very well liked, and they've been here for 5 generations. So they have a lot of friends. And as far as the people that are against it, we did have a group called the Kickapoo Stewards, and we worked really hard. Crawford Stewardship really helped us out a lot in trying to bring attention to what's happening. And I think right now that we really need to get back into the swing of things after recent things that had happened where they don't want to extend the moratorium. I think that was kind of a big blow, and I think it just created a lot of frustration with all of us trying to fight against it. And we just really, to get the study would be great, because then it would be wonderful if we could feel somewhat positive about, a neighbor having a CAFO. But right now we don't see any positive in it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that really answered your question, but
it does, it definitely does. And understand that there's difference of opinion in the community. Forrest, what would you add to that, if anything, about how folks have organized themselves, gotten engaged, and kind of what the request, where Susan kind of left us there, what this request to the DNR represents for the community?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm happy to fill in a little bit more. Susan mentioned the moratorium. There have in fact been 2 moratoriums. Folks got organized and there was a bunch of input to Marietta Township where they passed a moratorium. And there was a study committee of which I was an advisory member of. And lots of work was done there. Lots of public input was gathered. Eventually, the township decided that there was nothing they were going to do. Pretty much at that same time, Crawford Stewardship Project, Kickapoo Stewards, and an array of allies got a moratorium passed at the Crawford County level as well, which we're still under, although it will end at the end of December. We were really hoping that this CAFO moratorium would be extended, since while this was happening, we entered a pandemic. Many of the study committee meetings were canceled due to that. The water testing that I alluded to was delayed as well, so we weren't going to have that information. So there's really lots of perfectly valid reasons that the county should be extending the moratorium. There's been lots of public input again, and really broad consensus that this should happen, including among the staff at the county level. Many organizations signed on, and it's been really difficult. And so that's led to some of these tensions and divisions that Sue's alluding to. It's very frustrating when people are doing all the things that you're supposed to do to voice your concerns and try to have the decision makers do something to address those concerns, and it doesn't look like anything is going to be done. So we're really hoping that we get something out of this process, but so far the response from our local decision makers has been pretty minimal. And they said many a time that, well, this is the DNR's job. They've got it taken care of. It's their job. So I guess we're looking to the DNR
because of that,
yeah.
that recent history, then that there's more invested in the DNR's decision on the EIS within the community. Is that fair? And then I guess also, we were just talking before we went live here about the local and statewide organizations that also joined the call. So the original request came from MEA and from Crawford Stewardship Project and those 200 neighbors and residents. But tell us about the kind of groundswell of support from other organizations for us.
Yeah, so we created a letter that organizations could sign on to supporting this request for an environmental impact statement from the DNR for this operation. As of right now, and we're at the end of our time for organizations to sign on, we have 47 different organizations signed on, and we're talking about various farmers union chapters locally, as well as the state chapter, Trout Unlimited and sportsmen's groups, environmental groups, a really broad array of different organizations. It's really great to see that kind of support. And many of the votes, when votes were taken, were unanimous for this. So I think people are really waking up to the importance of this, and that the DNR protocols as they stand right now for permitting CAFOs are not adequate, and certainly not for an operation of this scale in a place of this sensitivity.
Yeah, absolutely. You and Crawford Stewardship Project and Susan should be really commended and lifted up for galvanizing that kind of support throughout the state for the request and for the principles behind the request. So I've got a couple more questions. I want to invite folks either on Facebook or over Zoom that they can, in the comments or in the chat, offer a question or two. We'll take them if we have some time here at the end. But Adam, I wanted to ask you, just yesterday, in fact, it was the governor's task force on climate change that came out with their final recommendations. And in the foreword to that report, the lieutenant governor said wrote this: the health and well-being of every citizen in this state is in grave danger because of the changing climate. And so I want to just ask you, why is the request related to that statement? Why is it that the state should be scrutinizing CAFO permitting decisions in the face of a changing climate? Could you talk a little bit about the connections there?
Yeah, of course. So there's a number of regulations that touch on precipitation and well, let's stick with precipitation, which is one of the major things that we expect to see change as a result of climate change in Wisconsin. We expect to see higher frequency and severity of extreme rainfall events in the state. And, particularly, we've seen some studies come out recently that have noted that the southwest portion of the state is one of those areas that is likely to see some of the most extreme rainfall events throughout the state. And so when there is capacity or engineering reviews that particularly rely on historical data as a means of understanding certain capacity or thresholds, there's just a recognition that those numbers are going to be inadequate now and are likely to be even more inadequate to protect the environment and the neighbors and residents in the future as those numbers become even more drastically off from the realities that climate change is causing. There's just a recognition, and it's good to see a recognition at the state level that in Wisconsin, we need to have some adaptation, some mitigation, and some resiliency efforts throughout the state. And, it's good to see that reflected in the Climate Change Task Force report. But just, more than just having it reflected, we need to see something done about it. And so given the expected changes in Crawford County precipitation over the coming years, that's, again, another reason to really support why DNR needs to do this review. In addition to that, I would just add that there are also concerns about CAFOs and their contributions through greenhouse gas emissions. We've seen recognition in other states that an environmental review of certain CAFOs should include some review or understanding of how those CAFOs would contribute to greenhouse gas emissions in light of a state's stated goals of greenhouse gas reduction. We're not there yet, at the same space as other states are currently in, but there's just a recognition that CAFOs do really touch on climate change in a lot of ways. And so we would hope to see that the EIS reflects the multitude of ways in which a CAFO really does interact with and intersect with climate change.
Yeah, thank you so much. Based on everything you're saying, it seems like at this point in history, with this particular proposal and this particular location, all of those factors point to scrutinizing this proposal, bringing science and careful attention to bear on the impacts that siting a hog CAFO in this location would entail. So thank you. This is my last question. There's one question from Melanie, and what votes were you referring to? And did we talk about votes? I think the moratorium votes. Yeah, could you just back us up, Forest, and just give us a little bit of an overview about the county board votes related to the moratoria?
Yeah, so when the moratorium was first passed, it passed by 10 votes for to 7 votes against. We actually weren't aware that CAFO moratorium extension was even going to be on the agenda this December until earlier this week. But it looks like it will be, and there will be a vote. We're not sure how that's going to go. We're hoping it's extended. This would be the county's last chance to do so before the moratorium expires. And if they're not willing to do that, we're just hoping that they are willing to pass something and do something to protect groundwater and the sensitive resources that we've been talking about.
Yeah, thank you. And that actually Melanie's question is a segue to my last question, which is about what folks who are watching either now live or later as a recording, what they can do to support the Crawford County community in this effort. And I want to, before turning it over to all of you to answer that question, just thank Susan again for joining us. And I think the way she got us started and explaining, why this is just such a special place within the state and to her and her family personally is really compelling. And I know that there are others that would want to support members of the Crawford County community who want to protect this really special region. So how can they do that? How can folks be supportive in the effort?
So part of this request to the Department of Natural Resources for an environmental impact statement includes an opportunity for really anyone who cares about this area and the future of this area and the waters in this area to urge them to do that. So I believe in the chat box, we can post the contact information for some of the DNR people to contact on that. And that would be very helpful, either calls or emails, if people could just let them know that we really need this and this has implications statewide. So you don't have to be a resident of Crawford County to do that. So that's one concrete action. If you do live in Crawford County, at this upcoming board meeting, there will be no opportunity for public comment, despite everything we've done. And so your only opportunity to give feedback is calling your county board supervisor and letting them know that it would be wise to extend the CAFO moratorium so we can really continue the work of the study that's been done and the options forward and weighing those. And also just that they need to take action to protect clean drinking water here. And if people are interested in keeping posted on this front, I would encourage people to visit Crawford Stewardship Project website, and we're on Facebook. And feel free to sign up for our mailing list, and there will be more actions going forward as they come. So we're never really sure what's going to happen or how it's going to work out, but it works because people chip in and people participate, and we're always grateful for all the passionate people out there who really care about this area and the water and the environment here and what agriculture is going to look like going forward, because we're totally for this area remaining an agricultural region. We have some of the best pastures in the nation, if not the world, and we can do great things in agriculture while keeping our resources clean and protecting neighbors' rights. So yeah, I encourage people to get involved if you're not already.
Thank you, Forrest. I think that that's a great place to leave it. But as we conclude, I just want to thank you. I want to thank Crawford Stewardship Project. I want to thank Susan and the many members of your community. I know all of us at Midwest Environmental Advocates admire everything that you've done, the tenacity and strength that you've shown in responding to this proposal, organizing yourselves, working on the local level, and now taking this really well thought out and powerful proposal to the DNR, and then galvanizing the community and the state in support of that. So it is a really, really impressive effort, and we are proud to be partners with you in it. So thank you so much for joining us. I want to thank Adam for his expertise and contributions, my coworkers Hannah and Peg for setting this up, and to all of you for joining us. And we're glad that we're able to connect this way. And please be in touch and encourage you to support the Crawford County community in the ways that we've talked about. So thank you.
Thank you. We always appreciate Midwest Environmental Advocates and the great work you do for us and so many of our little groups around the state.
Thanks, Forrest. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and we're signing off for now, but I'm sure we'll do this again soon.